If you had a Ferrari engine, would you put a Chevy Cruze brakes on it? Probably not. You're gonna wanna match your gas with your brakes. So if you have a Ferrari engine, you're gonna need Ferrari brakes to stop all that speed. Okay, so with that being said, we need to test your brakes before we get you into training to see what type of brakes we need to put on the car. What engine do we have? And then what do we need to match the brakes with? So today what we are gonna do is we're gonna talk about the inline lunge test from FMS. We're gonna go over basically your deceleration, your ability to get into the hip, to slow yourself down for change of direction, or if you're just running linearly and trying to stop before you get to a certain point. Now, there's a lot more in change of direction than just what the inline lunge is gonna show us, but it gives us a lot of the prerequisites that we need to actually hit the brakes. So with that being said, we're gonna go over what the inline lunge test looks like, what makes a good score, a bad score, what we're really looking for from our side of things to see if you can actually hit the marks, and then what training implications we have from there. All right, so we're gonna bring Casey in. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna have her set up on the FMS kit. So she's gonna grab this to start. And what the first thing we need to do is we're really gonna measure our, we're gonna get our bearings and we're gonna measure a point from the ground up to her knee. So I'm actually gonna have her step to the left. She's just gonna hold tight like that. Now, first thing we'll do, like I said, we're gonna measure the point to tibial tuberosity, which is right under the kneecap. So kneecap is right here, tibial tuberosity is right about here. So she's at about 43, 44, we'll call it that, okay? So with that being said, she's gonna go ahead and hop on the FMS kit. And her front foot, we're gonna test both sides. So we'll say her right foot is gonna be on the red line, and then her left foot, she's gonna put her heel at 44. You can use that for balance. So as she sets up, what we see is a couple different things. We see that this heel is right at 44, and we wanna make sure the foot is directly in the middle of the board. Okay, so that's a pretty good setup. You'll see this wants to go inward like this, so we actually have to come out with the toes right about there. So that's a good setup for her front leg. Now, if we look at the back leg, we can see, keep your heel right where it is, we can see this heel wants to shimmy over that way, and the toes wanna go here. Now that's probably because of internal rotation limitations up here at the hip. So for KC, if she is in this position, we are forcing her to go internal rotation. And if she doesn't have that, the natural inclination is to go out. Okay, and again, we're never gonna train like this in training. We're gonna make sure that this is all just standard for the test. So right now, the one fix I have to make on KC is I need to make sure this goes over to the right, even a little bit more. Now she's set up. Now, the big thing here is a lot of people are gonna say this feels really unnatural, really uncomfortable, because most of the time you're not so stacked in a line. If you think about bases of support, her base of support now is really skinny. It goes from her heel to her front foot, but it just wraps around the feet. So in a normal lunge position, the base of support can be already about this much wider than hers. So this is a tricky spot to lunge from, but it gives us a good idea of, can she actually drop down, access this back glute to slow herself down and then get out of that same position. So she's in the right starting position for the lower body. We've got the heel locked down, we've got her toes right around the red line, we've got her heel at that 44 spot. Now we're gonna set up her arms. So if her left foot is forward and her right foot is backwards, we're gonna grab that FMS stick, we're gonna grab the dowel with the right hand and put it up top and left hand down below. Okay, so right hand goes up top, left hand goes below. So she's gonna slide this hand down just a little bit further into the small of her neck, left hand up to the small of her back, and we're looking for 3 points of contact. So right at her head, mid-back, kind of right between the traps, and then small of her low back. So these 3 points are really important. That's gonna dictate whether or not she's able to maintain an upright position while she lunges. So while she has this position, a lot of people may waver left or right here and then have to reset up. That's why we let them use the pole to get their feet set up first and then go from there. So with this setup position, she's all good. We're gonna go ahead and test her left side. So what I'm gonna tell her to do is drop her right knee directly behind her left foot in a lunge position and keep this upright. Keep all 3 points of contact in contact with that dowel. So go ahead and drop into the lunge. And back up. Good, do it again. And now we see right at that left hand, right here, she's kind of losing this position right above the butt. So if she lunges one more time for me, You can see she's doing a little bit better job now, but it's still creating a little separation. So go ahead and relax, Casey. You can come out of that position. What that tells me as a practitioner is lower body's doing pretty well, but the upper body at the very end tilts forward just a bit. Now, is that gonna really screw up her training? No, her lunge pattern's actually pretty good. We would rank that a 2 out of 3. So to go over what we're looking for, a 0 is pain. A 1 means that we have multiple faults that we'll get into in a second here. A 2 means basically everything's there, maybe 1 or 2 faults, usually 1. And then a 3 means everything is top notch, perfect on both sides. So with KC, she just set up for her left foot forward, right hand up. We're gonna also do the other side and test for asymmetries there. So right now we won't do that, but you're gonna go ahead and test that when you're testing your athlete, because you wanna see if they are a 3 on the left and a 2 on the right. That's gonna bring their score down to a 2. Why do they have that asymmetry? That's what you're looking for. So I'm gonna bring Casey back in, and she's gonna go ahead and set up again. We're gonna show you some of the faults that we look for and then what they might mean. So she's gonna go ahead and set up the same way she did. So foot on the red line, heel on the 44, and then remember we're making those feet nice and square. And she's gonna go ahead and put the right arm up above the head and left arm down below. Perfect. So we already talked about one fault, which is losing any point of contact. Remember there's 3, the head, mid traps, and just the butt. If you lose any point of contact there, we know that the midsection is going normally into flexion. Now, some other faults we look for. Right now, her right foot is, again, it's trying to go into that external rotation. So before we even start, we need to make sure this is even, or else we know that it's not a perfect lunge. So as she goes ahead and go ahead and lunge, as she lunges, when she comes back up, if this foot wants to squirt out after the completion of the lunge, we know that it's not gonna be a perfect lunge. Now, similar to that, we're gonna go and see where her knee hits on this board. So go ahead and lunge, KC. And she does a good job there of putting the knee basically hitting right in the center of the board. That's what we're looking for. If it comes out to the right or on the left side to the left, then we know that she's tracking off to the side, mainly probably because of the hip. Another thing, now make sure this foot is right again, is if they can't get this heel down, there could be some ankle mobility issues or ankle mobility issues in the front foot. So those are the kind of lower body things we're looking for. In addition to that front foot, if it wobbles left or right as she goes down, that means she doesn't have a lot of good balance going into that front side. So remember, we're trying to see, can she even load that position so she can stop and come out, okay? Now, moving to the upper body, if as she lunges, she goes left or right here, then we know that she's not holding. So she may have the 3 points of contact in line, but if she goes right or left, we know that we don't have the core stability to actually hit this lunge. So other than that, those are basically the big ones that you're looking for. Remember, if you have just one little fault, maybe her knee just barely misses, it's gonna be a 2. Okay, if you have the knee misses, her foot wobbles, and she loses a point of contact, that's a 1. And remember, we're looking for both sides. You can go ahead and relax, Casey. So why does core stability have such an impact, and why are we looking for that left, right, or flexion extension? Is because if I am in the field of play, and let's say I'm a running back, and I want to stick my foot in the ground and go left, if my upper body continues going right and my lower body wants to go left, I'm gonna have a really hard time getting going that direction. But if I have the core stability to sit into the hip, lock this up, and then change direction, my whole body will move together with me, and I'm gonna go ahead and beat the defender in front of me. Same for the faults of like looking at the foot. If that foot isn't stable when it contacts the ground, when we're just in a simple lunge pattern, how are we gonna trust the foot to be stable when we're running as fast as we can and sticking it in the ground? So if we can't trust it there, we're not gonna be able to trust it on the field. We might roll ankles, that type of stuff. So that all adds up into change of direction. Now, we have one additional test that we throw on for this, which is our ankle mobility screen. This is the breakout. So I'm gonna bring Casey back in, and I'm gonna show her the setup really quick. So what it's gonna look like, back foot is gonna be flush with the board, and then front foot, we're gonna see where our big ankle bone is. So that's your medial malleolus right here. We want to put that right in line with the red line, and then make sure our entire feet are flush with the board. And then you can use this on either side. Ooh, I apparently need it on the right side. And all you're gonna do is on the other side, you're gonna drive the back foot as far forward as you can. So we're looking at ankle mobility on this back foot. Okay, so to show you a little bit better, I'll actually hop over to the other side. And so now you're looking at this knee. Does this knee cross the red line? And does my foot stay flush? So if I go all the way forward and come back without my heel coming up. So right now you can see I'm a little short okay, when it comes. You can see my, my heel coming up a little bit. So then we're gonna ask them, hey, do you feel tightness in the back of the ankle? Do you feel it up in the knee? Or do you feel like there's a block in the front of your foot? All of these things can impact your ankle mobility and dorsiflexion and plantar flexion. And so when you're trying to change direction or decelerate, if the ankle is the limiter, you're gonna find that mobility either in the knee or in the hip or somewhere else. So when we look at KC, she has a pretty good inline lunge. Her ankles are probably gonna be okay. But with that said, we wanna find out why the inline lunge is not responding the way we want it to respond. So what does this look like for training? Let's say I have someone who is a 1-1. They're gonna need not only lunging work, but I'm not really even gonna load the lunge pattern just yet. So if I were to load a 1, they are so dysfunctional that I might actually bring them into a point of pain, which we don't want. Now, what I'll need to do is if the ankles are restricted or limited in their mobility, I'm gonna work on their ankle mobility with different exercises like dorsiflexion, stuff like that. Maybe some goblet squats that make them hang down in the bottom position. And then I'm gonna work up the chain and make sure they can actually access the hip. So maybe it's the hip that's holding them back. Then we're doing hip mobility exercises, stuff like that. But for the most part, people's biggest miss is falling forward with the upper body. So it sounds a little counterintuitive, a little weird, but the person who can't lunge and can't access the hip really needs more core stability up here and then hip mobility. So they need to be able to put the core in the right place, put the hips in the right place, then access the full range of motion with the hip, and then start to strengthen that lunge pattern. So if you try to just throw load on dysfunction, you're most likely gonna hurt the person, or they're just not really gonna like you very much. Now, if you actually strengthen up the core, open up the hip, open up the ankle, now you're giving them the freedom to actually feel what it feels like to get into the glute and to actually expand that muscle and then use it to decelerate. And from there, you can bring up their little Chevy Cruise brakes and you can bring them up to Ferrari brakes and make sure that you can match their engine. And the reason I say that is because there are a ton of people who have a lot of giddy up, but they get hurt because they don't have the brakes to match it. So make sure you're testing your brakes, then make sure once you find out the reason that maybe you don't have the brakes you want, you train it in a smart way where you're looking at the mobility of the mobile joints and the stability of the stable joints.